Good morning, Namaste, and Assalamu Alaikum. Welcome to Mumbai, welcome to India, and welcome to a land we have called our shared home for over 5,000 years. As we gather here this morning for the Arabian Sea Dialogue, coming as we did in the safety of modern transport across the great sea that connects us, it is also a poignant reminder of how far we have come since our forefathers traversed the Arabian Sea through fair wind and storm, building and solidifying trade, economic and cultural linkages for over 5 millennia, starting with the Indus Valley civilization and the Dilmun civilization. Our meet here then is as much a testament to their collective efforts as it is emblematic of our deep shared intent to connect, create, and collaborate, the theme for today's dialogue, to build a prosperous future for our peoples, the Arabian Sea community, which today accounts for over a third of all humanity. Our synergy, our trust, and our commitment to greater good, deeply ingrained in our civilizational ethos, will enable us to not only build a beautiful future for our generations to come, but also one that is inclusive and representative of the needs and aspirations of the entire world, acting in greater common good as our cultures so rightly teach us. The Arabian Sea community can offer solutions to the world's problems rooted in the sensibilities and priorities of the global South. Today's unique geopolitical complex, the war in Eurasia that has disrupted global supply chains and cascaded to create deep economic distress, the self-serving play by a few determined actors pushing nations into a vortex of debt, despair, and despondency, and the deep divides in the international community exposed by the COVID-19 pandemic, and as our President Dr. Samir Saran rightly articulates, the weaponization of everything, from pharmaceuticals to banking to technology, are all great challenges of our times. And our coming together can bring forth new and sustainable pathways to unique and transformative solutions that bears within the interests of all humanity. Your very presence here is a testament to that thinking and our tremendous potential to co-create winning solutions. I thank you for believing in that promise and for your noble determination to be the stellar exemplar of collaboration and coexistence, coming from great distances as you have, despite your very busy and full lives. I would be remiss if I did not mention the yeoman efforts of our trustee, Mr. Rajesh Shah, our chairman, Mr. Sanjay Joshi, our president, Dr. Samir Saran, our distinguished fellow Vice Admiral Girish Luthra, our distinguished fellow Ambassador Navdeep Suri, the most passionate evangelist of the India-GCC promise, and the entire ORF team who have put this important dialogue together. Eleanor Roosevelt once said, "The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams." And as we embark on our deliberations today, may our efforts and actions birth a million beautiful dreams for the good of all. I wish you a day of rich and meaningful deliberation. May I now request Ambassador Navdeep Suri, Distinguished Fellow of ORF, to deliver his address.
Thank you, Jaibal, Your Excellencies, my esteemed colleague, Ambassador Harshvardhan Shringla. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Namaskar, good morning. You know, we started talking about this Arabian Sea Dialogue concept about a year and a half back during COVID. And this is soon after I had joined the ORF, after completing my diplomatic journey for about 36 years. And the reason was that my last assignment as ambassador to UAE brought home something very positive, but also something challenging. On the positive side, we could see that the bilateral relations between India and virtually all of the countries in the Gulf were growing like never before. And yet, you could sense a disconnect. When I met people my age, or maybe a little bit older, there was almost this umbilical connect with India, and with Mumbai in particular. This was the go-to city for trade, for education, for tourism, for healthcare. If there was one big city that loomed large from the vantage point of the Gulf, this is Mumbai. And yet somewhere through the 1970s, 80s, 90s, we had managed to lose that connect. And as the countries of the Gulf became richer, and as India started growing, both of us started looking across each other to the west and east, rather than looking at each other. So while you had an earlier generation that could communicate in Hindi, Urdu, Hindustani, whatever, and recall not only old Bollywood heroes, but remember times when the rupee was a local currency, you now had new generations that really didn't know each other. And so when I came to ORF, one of the things that I had in mind was, how do we try and fix this gap? Can we create other conversations beyond the government to government space? Because those are going very well. But what about youth? What about culture? What about commerce? Or all of the other things that really constitute the bedrock of a relationship? And that's where this idea of the Arabian Sea Dialogue came, that the narrow stretch of water that has always been a bridge between India and the Gulf, how to revive that connection. We started initially by reaching out to think tanks in the Gulf and saying, here in ORF, we are a think tank. Let's see whether we can create those conversations between ORF, between thinkers, intellectuals, practitioners in India and those in the Gulf. And that was reasonably successful, even though it was in the virtual space, but we ended up speaking with Darasat in Bahrain. We had conversations with the Emirates Policy Center in Abu Dhabi, with Arab Planning Institute in Kuwait and others. And so we made a bit of a beginning. Then we created a virtual platform for the Arabian Sea Dialogue, and we did about 4 or 5 conversations trying to pick themes that young people would connect with on technology, on entertainment, on digital universe, and so on. And that is successful to a point within the limitations of the fact that it was virtual, and we were really trying to stretch ourselves to create those conversations. So I'm delighted that today we've arrived at a point where we have this first in-person dialogue, because really there is no substitute. I am meeting people that I've been talking with, and my own colleagues from ORF that we haven't really met, except on the margins of a Zoom screen. But the other reason for this dialogue, I think, is that too often we see each other through the prism of Western media. And that's a distorted prism. And through that prism, when we see each other, from India, often the Gulf is seen as a region that's volatile, conflict-prone, or perhaps a place which has lots of Indians who go to work and send back a lot of remittances. And there's so much more depth and texture to the relationship. I, having served in the region, feel that our own people in India need to see some of the trends that are shaping up. Because I think really for think tanks, for intellectuals, for diplomats, it's important that you don't look at the static picture, but see where it's evolving, where it's heading. And if I can be bold today and say that, broadly speaking, the Gulf today is in a far better situation than it was 3 years ago. And if there is one large trend that you can see, that is a conscious effort by some of the key players in the region to control intra-regional conflicts and arrive at a degree of, at a modus vivendi amongst each other. You see, 3 years back, Qatar was on one side and the Arab Quartet was on the other, and yet last year you had the Al-Ula agreement, and now that particular rift has been buried. There was immense tension between Turkey as a key regional player and Saudi Arabia and UAE. And today, you not only see that those conflicts have been largely set aside, but there's a conscious articulation from Abu Dhabi, for instance, that this is not the time for those conflicts. This is a time to really focus on shared economic prosperity. And so when the Turkish president now comes to Saudi Arabia, or when the president of UAE goes to Ankara, you hear about $10 billion of investment, and you see other numbers rather than being caught in that narrow trap of regional rivalries. Even with Iran, which has been such a point of conversation in the region for all sorts of reasons, there's a dialogue going on with Saudi Arabia, there's a dialogue going on with UAE, there's talk of full ambassador level representation being restored between Abu Dhabi and Tehran. So if one can see one trend, that is that there's an attempt to manage the conflicts within the region. And that bodes very well for countries like us, which are in the neighborhood, because when you're not talking to each other, it becomes that much more complicated for us to manage those relationships. The second key trend, I think, is what has happened since the Abraham Accords and the space that it has opened up, the possibilities that it has opened up for cooperation in ways that simply did not exist 3 years ago. India has very close relations with the Gulf, and India has very close relations with Israel. And so, post the Abraham Accords, we see initiatives towards trilateral cooperation. And Ambassador Shringla mentioned I2U2. India, Israel, UAE, and US coming together in an informal minilateral. I think our diplomacy has been fairly nimble in taking advantage of some of these new opportunities and openings that are coming up. And it is perhaps no coincidence that the first two projects that have been taken up by I2U2, one is a $2 billion food security project, which will see active partnership of UAE financially and of Israel and the US with technology. And the second is a clean energy project, which combines solar and wind with battery storage technologies that are absolutely state of the art. Both those projects are going to be located in India. And so, you know, again, it creates that new dynamic that did not previously exist. And I think the third trend, which I'll leave, is the growth of India will make it almost inevitable that our countries will move closer together. We have a human bridge between India and the Gulf. We have a commercial bridge, and I think what we are going to see increasingly is also a shared security bridge that Excellency Mr. Pankaj Khimji referred to. In my conversations, and Admiral Singh was a regular visitor to the Gulf with his very capable naval warships, I think there's no question that India is seen as a net provider of security, a net contributor of security in the region. We are seen as a country that is large, stable, increasingly more capable, and interested. So the final point I want to make is that given these 3 or 4 large trends that are emerging, we certainly were guilty that we took our eyes off the ball for several decades. We articulated a look east policy that did wonders to our relations with the ASEAN. But somewhere we forgot that this was also our near neighborhood. And it's only belatedly that we took up the look west policy and act west policy. And I think the amount of energy that Prime Minister Modi and his team have invested in our relationship with the Gulf is quite unprecedented. We are demonstrating through words, through actions, through visits, that this is a critically important region for us. And I think, in a sense, the challenge now is also for the Gulf. Are you ready for your look east policy, where we again try and restore? You can't ever set the clock back, but certainly there's a lot more that we can do in terms of points of engagement. And I think as we go forward during the course of the day, I hope that we can come up with specific areas, particularly how to reconnect the younger generation. If, for instance, India is going to be one of the top 3 or 4 trade partners for the countries in the Gulf, and I think that's inevitable that that's going to be the case, what are you doing to encourage young Arabs to come for, say, internships with large Indian companies and understand the business environment better? I was delighted to hear that the young lady there is coming to Delhi University to pursue a degree in political science. We need a lot more of that. The idea that we'll have an IIT in Abu Dhabi in the next couple of years, again, creates a very important point of intersection. But the universe is open, and I hope that if nothing else, today will be the starting point of a diverse range of conversations and some actual ideas that we from ORF can take forward. Thank you very much.